Well, hello there. It's real early in the morning. It's like 6 something. And I figured I'd get a reading in before the birds wake up. But you know how rowdy they can be. So we're headed to chapter 4. And the title is called Helping Others. At the end of my first year at Hampton, I was confronted with another difficulty. Most of the students went home to spend their vacation. I had no money with which to go home, but I had to go somewhere. In those days, very few students were permitted to remain at the school during vacation. It made me feel very sad and homesick to see other students preparing to leave and starting for home. I not only had no money with which to go home, but I had none with which to go anywhere. In some way, however, I had gotten hold of an extra second-hand coat, which I thought was a pretty valuable coat. This I decided to sell in order to get a little money for traveling expenses. I had a good deal of boyish pride, and I tried to hide as far as I could from the other students the fact that I had no money and nowhere to go. I made it known to a few people in the town of Hampton that I had this coat to sell, and after a good deal of persuading, one colored man promised to come to my room to look the coat over and consider the matter of buying it. This cheered my drooping spirits considerably. Early the next morning, my prospective customer appeared. After looking the garment over carefully, he asked me how much I wanted for it. I told him I thought it was worth $3. He seemed to agree with me as to price, but remarked in the most matter-of-fact way, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I will take the coat and I will pay you 5 cents cash down and pay you the rest of the money just as soon as I can get it." It was not hard to imagine what my feelings were at this time. I imagine he was like, "Nigga, you must be crazy." Hey, Black Dust. I'm doing well. With this disappointment, I gave up all hope of getting out of the town of Hampton for my vacation's work. I wanted very much to go where I might secure work that would at least pay me enough to purchase some much needed clothing and other necessities. In a few days, practically all the students and teachers had left for their homes, and this served to depress my spirits even more. After trying for several days, is oh boy. After trying for several days in and near the town of Hampton, I finally secured work in a restaurant at Fortress Monroe. The wages, however, were very little more than my board. At night and between meals, I found considerable time for study and reading, and in this direction, I improved myself very much during the summer. When I left school at the end of my first year, I owed the institution $16 that I had not been able to work out. It was my greatest ambition during the summer to save money enough with which to pay this debt. I felt, could you imagine having to work a whole summer just to come up with $16? I felt that this was a debt of honor and that I could hardly bring myself to the point of even trying to enter school again till it was paid. I economized in every way that I could think of, did my own washing, and went without necessary garments. But still, I found my summer vacation ending, and I did not have the $16. One day, during the last week of my stay in the restaurant, I found under one of the tables a crisp new $10 bill. I could hardly contain myself. I was so happy. As it was not my place of business, I felt it to be the proper thing to show the money to the proprietor. This I did. He seemed as glad as I was, but he coolly explained to me that, as it was his place of business, he had a right to keep the money, and he proceeded to do so. Now, what the? Look, you know you need $16 to pay for school. You find $10 under a table nobody needed to know. That's a blessing from the Lord. That's the Lord saying, here's $10, you only owe $6 more. You gonna show it to the owner, and he feels, hey, this is my restaurant, my table, my floor, this $10. $10 belong to me. And he kept it. Why would you listen? You know, it has happened where somebody in their bank account one day found like $700,000. A mistake by the bank. My thing is, if I wake up and there's $700,000 in my bank account, that's a blessing from the Lord. And I'm keeping it. Now, when they find out, oh, it was a mistake, where's the money? You can arrest me, but I'll tell you, I read my Bible, and the Word of God said that if I should honor Him, worship and praise Him, and follow His 10 commandments, that He will open up the windows of heaven and pour me out a blessing that I would not have enough room to receive. And so I've been doing everything right, and I go to my bank account, there's 700,000. The Lord is living up to His word. I lived up to mine, and the Lord blessed me. I'd be sitting in court with a big old church hat and a Bible in my hand, on the stand, letting them know this was a blessing from the Lord. Well, they just have to take the Lord's money. This, I confess, was another pretty hard blow to me. By your fault, Booker T. I will not say that I became discouraged, for as I now look back over my life, I do not recall that I ever became discouraged over anything that I set out to accomplish. I have begun everything with the idea that I could succeed, and I never had much patience with the multitudes of people who are always ready to explain why one cannot succeed. I have always had a high regard for the man who could tell me how to succeed. I determined to face the situation just as it was. At the end of the week, I went to the treasurer of the Hampton Institute, General J.F.B. Marshall, and told him frankly my condition. To my gratification, he told me that I could re-enter the institution and that he would trust me to pay the debt when I could. During the second year, I continued to work as a janitor. The education that I received at Hampton out of the textbooks, but a small part of what I learned there. They missed the word. It should be the education that I received at Hampton out of the textbook was but a small part of what I learned there. One of the things that impressed itself upon me deeply the second year was the unselfishness of the teachers. It was hard for me to understand how any individuals could bring themselves to the point where they could be so happy and working for others. Before the end of the year, I think I began learning that those who were happiest are those who do the most for others. This lesson I have tried to carry with me ever since. That is so true. Those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. That is so true. If you depressed or down in the dumps, whatever the case may be, just start helping somebody. I tell you, it will lift you up out of that drought of happiness so quickly. It really will. I also learned a valuable lesson at Hampton by coming into contact with the best breeds of livestock and fowls. No student, I think, who has had the opportunity of doing this could go out into the world and content himself with the poorest grades. Perhaps the most valuable thing that I got out of my second year was an understanding of the use and value of the Bible. Miss Natalie Lord, one of the teachers from Portland, Maine, taught me how to use and love the Bible. Before this, I had never cared a great deal about it, but now I learned to love and read the Bible, not only for the spiritual help which it gives, but an account of it as literature. The lessons taught me in this respect took such a hold upon me that at the present time, when I am at home, no matter how busy I am, I always make it a rule to read a chapter or a portion of a chapter in the morning before beginning the work of the day. Whatever ability I may have as a public speaker, I owe it in a measure to Miss Lord. When she found out that I had some inclination in this direction, she gave me private lessons in the matter of breathing, emphasis, and articulation. Simply to be able to talk in public for the sake of talking has never had the least attraction for me. In fact, I consider that there is nothing so empty and unsatisfactory as mere abstract public speaking. But from my early childhood, I had a desire to do something to make the world better and then be able to speak to the world about that thing. The debating societies at Hampton were a constant source of delight to me. These were held on Saturday evening, and during my whole life at Hampton, I do not recall that I missed a single meeting. I not only attended the weekly debating society, but was instrumental in organizing an additional society. I noticed that between the time when supper was over and the time to begin evening study, there were about 20 minutes which the young men usually spent in idle gossip. About 20 of us formed a society for the purpose of utilizing this time in debate or in practice in public speaking. Few persons ever derived more happiness or benefit from the use of 20 minutes of time than we did in this way. At the end of my second year at Hampton, by the help of some money sent me by my mother and brother John, supplemented by a small gift from one of the teachers at Hampton, I was enabled to return to my home in Malden, West Virginia, to spend my vacation. When I reached home, I found that the salt furnaces were not running and that the coal mine was not operating on account of the miners being out on a strike. This was something which it seemed usually occurred whenever the men got 2 or 3 months ahead of their savings. During the strike, of course, they spent all that they had saved and would often return to work in debt at the same wages or would move to another mine at considerable expense. In either case, my observation convinced me that the miners were worse off at the end of a strike. Before the days of strikes in that section of the country, I knew miners who had considerable money in the bank. But as soon as the professional labor agitators got control, the savings of even the more thrifty ones began disappearing. My mother and other members of the family were, of course, much rejoiced to see me and to note the improvement that I had made during my 2 years' absence. The rejoicing on the part of all classes of the colored people, and especially the older ones, over my return was almost pathetic. I had to pay a visit to each family and take a meal with each, and at each place tell the story of my experiences at Hampton. In addition to this, I had to speak before the church and Sunday school and at various other places. The thing that I'm most in search of, though, work, I could not find. There was no work on account of the strike. I spent nearly the whole of the first month of my vacation in an effort to find something to do by which I could earn money to pay my way back to Hampton and save a little money to use after reaching there. Toward the end of the first month, I went to a place a considerable distance from my home to try to find employment. I did not succeed, and it was night before I got started on my return. When I had gotten within a mile or so of my home, I was so completely tired that I could not walk any further, and I went into an old abandoned house to spend the remainder of the night. About 3 o'clock in the morning, my brother John found me asleep in this house and broke to me as gently as he could the sad news that our dear mother had died during the night. This seemed to be this seemed to me to be the saddest and blankest moment in my life. For several years my mother had not been in good health, but I had no idea when I parted from her the previous day that I should never see her alive again. Besides that, I had always had an intense desire to be with her when she did pass away. One of the chief ambitions which spurred me on in Hampton was that I might be able to get to be in a position in which I could better make my mother comfortable and happy. She had so often expressed the wish that she might be permitted to live to see her children educated and started out in the world. In a very short time after the death of my mother, our little house was in confusion. My sister Amanda, although she tried to do the best she could, was too young to know anything about keeping house, and my stepfather was not able to hire a housekeeper. Sometimes we had food cooked for us, and sometimes we did not. I remember that more than once a can of tomatoes and some crackers constituted a meal. Our clothing went uncared for, and everything about our home was soon in a tumble down condition. It seemed to me that this was the most dismal period of my life. My good friend, Mrs. Ruffner, to whom I have already referred, always made me welcome at her home and assisted me in many ways during this trying period. Before the end of the vacation, she gave me some work, and this, together with work in a coal mine at some distance from my home, enabled me to earn a little money. At one time, it looked as if I would have to give up the idea of returning to Hampton, but my heart was set on returning, that I determined not to give up going back without a struggle. I was very anxious to secure some clothes for the winter, but in this I was disappointed, except for a few garments which my brother John secured for me. Notwithstanding my need of money and clothing, I was very happy in the fact that I had secured enough money to pay my traveling expenses back to Hampton. Once there, I knew I could make myself so useful as a janitor that I could in some way get through the school year. 3 weeks before the time for the opening of the term at Hampton, I was pleasantly surprised to receive a letter from my good friend, Miss Mary F. Mackey, the lady principal, asking me to return to Hampton 2 weeks before the opening of the school in order that I might assist her in cleaning the buildings and getting things in order for the new school year. This was just the opportunity I wanted. It gave me a chance to secure a credit in the treasurer's office. I started for Hampton at once. During these 2 weeks, I was taught a lesson which I shall never forget. Miss Mackey was a member of one of the oldest and most cultured families of the North, and yet for 2 weeks she worked by my side, cleaning windows, dusting rooms, putting beds in order, and whatnot. She felt that things would not be in condition for the opening of school unless every window pane was perfectly clean, and she took the greatest satisfaction in helping to clean them herself. The work which I have described she did every year that I was at Hampton. It was hard for me at this time to understand how a woman of her education and social standing could take such a delight in performing such service in order to assist in the elevation of an unfortunate race. Ever since then, I have had no patience with any school for my race in the South which did not teach its students the dignity of labor. During my last year at Hampton, every minute of my time that was not occupied with my duties as janitor was devoted to hard study. I was determined, if possible, to make such a record in my class as would cause me to be placed on the honor roll of commencement speakers. This I was successful in doing. It was June of 1875 when I finished the regular course of study at Hampton. The greatest benefits that I got out of my life at the Hampton Institute, perhaps, may be classified under two heads. First was contact with the great man, General S.C. Armstrong, who, I repeat, was, in my opinion, the rarest, strongest, and most beautiful character that it has ever been my privilege to meet. Second, at Hampton, for the first time, I learned what education was expected to do for an individual. Before going there, I had a good deal of the then rather prevalent idea among our people that to secure an education meant to have a good, easy time, free from all necessity for manual labor. At Hampton, I not only learned that it was not a disgrace to labor, but learned to love labor, not alone for its financial value, but for labor's own sake and for the independence and self-reliance which the ability to do something which the world wants done brings. I'm going to read that again. At Hampton, I not only learned that it was not a disgrace to labor, but learned to love labor, not alone for its financial value, but for labor's own sake, and for the independence and self-reliance which the ability to do something which the world wants done brings. At that institution, I got my first taste of what it meant to live a life of unselfishness, my first knowledge of the fact that the happiest individuals are those who do the most to make others useful and happy. I was completely out of the money when I graduated. In company with other Hampton students, I secured a place as a table waiter in a summer hotel in Connecticut and managed to borrow enough money with which to get there. I had not been in this hotel long before I found out that I knew practically nothing about waiting on a hotel table. The head waiter, however, supposed that I was an accomplished waiter. He soon gave me charge of a table at which there sat 4 or 5 wealthy and rather aristocratic people. My ignorance of how to wait upon them was so apparent that they scolded me in such a severe manner that I became frightened and left their table, leaving them sitting there without food. As a result of this, I was reduced from the position of waiter and that of a dish carrier. but I determined to learn the business of waiting and did so within a few weeks and was restored to my former position. I have had the satisfaction of being a guest in this hotel several times since I was a waiter there. At the close of the hotel season, I returned to my former home in Malden and was elected to teach the colored school at that place. This was the beginning of one of the happiest periods of my life. I now felt I had the opportunity to help the people of my hometown to a higher life. I felt from the first that mere book education was not all that the young people of the town needed. I began my work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and as a rule, it did not end until 10 o'clock at night. In addition to the usual routine of teaching, I taught the pupils to comb their hair and to keep their hands and faces clean, as well as their clothing. I gave special attention to teaching them the proper use of the toothbrush and the bath. In all my teaching, I have watched carefully the influences of the toothbrush, and I am convinced that there are few single agencies of civilization that are more far reaching. There were so many of the older boys and girls in town, as well as men and women, who had to work in the daytime but still were craving an opportunity for some education, that I soon opened a night school. From the first, this was crowded every night, being about as large as the school that I taught in a day. The efforts of some of the men and women, who in many cases were over 50 years of age, to learn were in some cases very pathetic. My day and night schoolwork was not all that I undertook. I established a small reading room and a debating society. On Sundays, I taught two Sunday schools, one in the town of Malden in the afternoon and the other in the morning at a place 3 miles distant from Malden. In addition to this, I gave private lessons to several young men whom I was fitting to send to the Hampton Institute. Without regard to pay and with little thought of it, I taught anyone who wanted to learn anything that I could teach him. I was supremely happy in the opportunity of being able to assist somebody else. I did receive, however, a small salary from the public fund for my work as a public school teacher. During the time that I was a student at Hampton, my older brother John not only assisted me all that he could, but worked all of the time in the coal mines in order to support the family. He willingly neglected his own education that he might help me. It was my earnest wish to help him to prepare to enter Hampton and to save enough money to assist him in his expenses there. Both of these objects I was successful in accomplishing. In 3 years, my brother finished the course at Hampton, and he is now holding the important position of Superintendent of Industries at Tuskegee. When he returned from Hampton, we both combined our efforts and savings to send our adopted brother, James, through the Hampton Institute. This was succeeded in doing, and he is now the postmaster at Tuskegee Institute. The year 1877, which was my second year of teaching in Malden, I spent very much as I did the first. So you see how they did it? The first one struggled real hard. Family members assisted as much as they could, but they didn't have much to give. But he sacrificed, got himself done, finished. And then it was just a little bit easier to help his brother go through Hampton. He came out, and then those two together put their money together and made it easier for the stepbrother to go through Hampton and graduate and come out. That's how we did it back then. I have a auntie. I mentioned, if you see the video with the Halloween decorations, you see the thumbnail, the skeleton. I think I showed the picture. I have a picture of Auntie and Uncle Hal. Auntie was my grandmother's sister. Auntie was the one who came from Barbados to here. And she reached back to Barbados and brought a male relative over who was a teenager. She put him through school. He became a psychiatrist. Together they went and got another relative, I think his brother, brought him over. He became a dentist with the help of those two. Then those three together went and got somebody else and brought them over. And we're talking about, the early 1900s. Auntie was born in 1896. That's what I've known my family to do. Now, here in the early 2000s, I got 3 daughters of one of my first cousins who was murdered. And I just tried to do what Auntie did. Get them in a good area, in a nice house. They have their own rooms and great schools. And they just didn't appreciate it. Very strange to me. Very strange. As a matter of fact, other family members kind of didn't appreciate it. And I'm talking about family members in my generation. Like, the fuck? How am I the bad person in all of this? But the generations have gotten watered down so bad that in today's climate, should there be a dire conflict with what's going on, should it include us in this dire conflict, with the younger generations, I don't think they are prepared. I don't think that they have the wherewithal to even know how to fight. And you have to understand, these are the generations that grew up seeing black people on TV, seeing black people on billboards, in the community. And, they grew up like that. They didn't grow up in my generation. I came in, almost the tail end of a white world where you saw nothing but white people. There was white people on TV all the damn time. It was a big thing if colored people would show up on TV. I mean, that was big like a Mike Tyson boxing event in the 80s. If you turned on the radio, you heard nothing but white people. It was a white world with limited opportunities and struggles and so on and so forth. And so being deprived and oppressed stirred up a fight in us, because there were things that we needed to achieve. There are things that we wanted to accomplish. And one of those things was to cease being, downtrodden and oppressed. But the younger generations, thus what the prior generations, made it easier for them. They didn't have to deal with such oppression, at least not up in their face like we did. But a lot more things were afforded to them that we wanted to be available for them. You know what I'm saying? And because they didn't have to struggle or fight so hard socially Now we got a watered down generation, and we got people in power trying to take us back to the days of which we were fighting for. And so the younger generation has no clue what those days were like, what those times were like. Anyway, let me get off my soapbox. It was while my home was at Malden that what was known as the Ku Klux Klan was in the height of its activity. The Ku Klux were bands of men who had joined themselves together for the purpose of regulating the conduct of the colored people, especially with the object of preventing the members of the race from exercising any influence in politics. They corresponded somewhat to the patrollers, of whom I used to hear a great deal during the days of slavery when I was a small boy. The patrollers were bands of white men, usually young men, who were organized largely for the purpose of regulating the conduct of the slaves at night in such matters as preventing the slaves from going from one plantation to another without passes, and for preventing them from holding any kind of meetings without permission and without the presence at these meetings for at least one white man. Those were the early days of policemen, if you ask me. The patrollers, those were policemen. More things change, the more they stay the same. Like the patrollers, the Ku Klux operated almost wholly at night. They were, however, more cruel than the patrollers. Their objects, in the main, were to crush, oh, the page is bent, were to crush out the political aspirations of the Negroes. But they did not confine themselves to this, because schoolhouses as well as churches were burned by them, and many innocent persons were made to suffer. During this period, not a few colored people lost their lives. As a young man, the acts of these lawless bands made a great impression upon me. I saw one open battle take place at Malden between some of the colored and white people. There must have been not far from 100 persons engaged on each side. Many on both sides were seriously injured, among them being General Lewis Ruffner, the husband of my friend, Mrs. Viola Ruffner. General Ruffner tried to defend the colored people, and for this he was knocked down and was seriously wounded that he never completely recovered. It seemed to me, as I watched this struggle between members of the two races, that there was no hope for our people in this country. The Ku Klux period was, I think, the darkest part of the Reconstruction days. So listen, y'all, I see this very thing coming back. Open your eyes, pay attention. Have you noticed within the last 2 weeks, Charlie Kirk people have been showing up at HBCUs? As fast as things are moving, I think within the next few times they show up, they're going to burn it down, because that's what they do. Ain't nothing changed. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Anytime black people are progressive, when we say fuck you, we do our own thing, what do? They come and burn it down. Just like what I just read in this book. They will burn down their schoolhouses. They will burn down their churches. These Charlie Kirk MAGA people are itching to burn down the HBCUs. What do you think? They really just coming there to spread white Jesus and the ideologies of Charlie Kirk? No, they're assessing the situation. I saw them trying to get into a church last Sunday. And those people made a whole wall of colored people and wouldn't let the bag of folks in. It's what they do. They burn our shit down. When we had, what's the name of that street? You know that street, that whole town where we had our own banks. We were thriving. They can't stand to see that. What do? They came and burnt the whole town down. When there were towns all over the South, black folks doing as well as can be. Some weren't even doing so well. But it was a town full of colored folks. You know what they did? Not only in the South, there's some places in the Midwest, they did the same thing. They flooded the whole town. The whole town is sitting under a lake today, i.e. Lake Lanier here in Georgia. And I always wonder, how come every year about 10 people at least die in Lake Lanier? Sometimes they say hands come out of the water and pull folks off the boat down there and they drown. That's what some people say. That is a spooky, haunted lake. But there's a whole town that was the home of us that they flooded. And there's lakes all over the country that ain't nothing but a flooded town of black folks. And please know, when they flooded the town, it wasn't like, hey niggas, we about to flood this town, you might want to pack up and leave. They gave them no warning. They just flooded the town with everybody in it. Whoever was home, whoever was at work. I have referred to this unpleasant part of the history of the South simply for the purpose of calling attention to the great change that has taken place since the days of the Ku Klux. Today, there are no such organizations in the South. Really? And the fact that such ever existed is almost forgotten by both races. What? There are a few places in the South now where public sentiment would permit such organizations to exist. The more things change, the more they stay the same. They may not be called the Ku Klux Klan today, but they do exist, and they go by another name, and that name is MAGA. Make America Great Again. When there was slavery. That's what they want. That's what they yearn for. That's what they miss. Are your eyes open? Are you thinking? Are you paying attention? There's no Mexicans or immigrants working on white people's farms. White people who have farms that have been in their family for 100, 200, even 300 years. Some of them have lost that farm. And a lot are hanging on to their farms by a thread. I already see videos by white folks talking about, why can't the blacks work our farms? When they get finished with this immigration stuff, what you think who you think they're gonna look at next? Oh man, whip ass, if slavery can't come back. Don't put nothing past these MAGA people. Don't put it past them. Don't stick your head in the sand, and don't think it's far-fetched. Not at this particular point in time. Not as how fast they're getting things done. You don't see the grand possibility of those of us who have our own businesses, our own homes. You don't see the possibility of them snatching us out and taking over our businesses and homes if they're not going to burn them down. Think. Keep your eyes open and pay attention. Pay attention. Have a plan. Be prepared. And with that being said, the sun has risen. Once again, we're going to thank God for it. And that concludes the reading of Up From Slavery, Chapter 4. I'll be back again soon. Peace.